Rebirth has been in my hands for almost 2 weeks, and I can assure you it is real. Is it real good? We'll get to that. Square has asked that nothing outside of Chapter 2 or the Grasslands can be shown, so I'll do my best to cover what I can. They also allowed trailer footage, but Square's trailers might as well be called spoiler casts, so I'll use those as sparingly as I can. Make sure to subscribe, and if you aren't getting notifications, make sure to hit the notification bell. Rebirth opens up close to where the first ended, and you're joined back up with Cloud, Tifa, Barret, and others. The game takes very little time to get going, with a flashback and then a leap forward into the wider, larger world that fans have been wanting to revisit in a 3D fashion for years. What makes a Final Fantasy game to me, if you ask 10 fans, you might as well get 10 answers. But for me personally, it's a sense of wonder, exploration, tons of minigames, and camaraderie. At least the ones I've loved. And that's your gig in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth from the start. In many ways, it is a tale of two experiences, though. One, a love letter written by your childhood self to the future in the hopes of a remake that would be so profound it feels like stepping from the space shuttle to the Enterprise. And the other is a letter back, an apology that games and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth haven't quite got there yet. Walking around the city is phenomenal in that Final Fantasy kind of way. Not an interaction fest like many other titles, but instead a town of living, breathing people going about their lives. While they may repeat themselves, it still has this feeling of liveliness to it. Finally, seeing the world reaching out in front of you for the first time in 3D is a profound experience and something that is noticeable. Also, exploring the initial places, there's these moments of brilliance where the magnetic feeling of the world is also braced against a cold reminder that Cloud and his groups are out there in a desire to stop mana from being Capri-Sunned out of the planet. So there's this very cool light and dark dichotomy in the atmosphere that you can feel directly from the start. Graphically, yes, Rebirth is a bit of a mixed bag. It's at one time grand and massive with huge vistas stretching out in front of you and incredible amounts of verticality and variation in forms and in fauna. But what's more noticeable is that you're going to fight flying insects, magic beasts, huge warriors, yet the game's biggest enemy and one you really can't defeat is Pop-In. The wider world is fantastic looking. It's just that you notice details like this coming back again and again and again. Small spikes in an otherwise smooth line of presentation that the game wants to give you. It's not surprising, especially when you take into account the massive change in the environments that this sequel throws at you, and they make everything in Remake feel like a small plated tester platter for a Las Vegas buffet, where the image is the most stable and just the presentation itself is right in the middle of the battles and the locations and incredible spell effects the game throws at you. Final Fantasy may not have the largest spell repository. Their spell books probably look like a condominium's visiting pamphlet, but you can never claim they don't go full ham on the effects. Some of Rebirth's smallest spells still fill an entire area with crystalline energy or swirling arcs of crazy glass-looking magical powers. It's overpowered, overproduced, and the best part of the game. And that high production value in those moments is again displayed in the soundtrack. Now, Rebirth more than Remake had a number of tracks with surprisingly divergent themes and moods to them, more quizzical in nature, comical in tone. At times, I didn't actually expect it, as well as a couple very odd ditties that played when meeting characters. I dig that. A series this long in the tooth where we're seeing them remake an ancient game into 3 more might sit back and say, orchestra, play everything. But it doesn't. Well, not all the time. There are still full-throated pieces for major battles, and you won't meet anything above 9 feet that doesn't have its own theme song, but still, it's not bad. And that same familiarity was in the voices. Characters new and old don't disappoint, or they do if you didn't like them in Remake. While you meet characters also familiar, not so much here in Part 2, they're all fine. They will never be anything more than placeholders for the mental patterns that gamers have had in their own brains from repeat playing of the original game, or for other people who are hearing them for the first time or second time, cheesy. They work. What also works is the sound. Mostly. The game has a tremendous number of excellent effects and environmentals, especially when traveling or during major cutscenes, and spells each with a nice front face to them, so you can tell which spell's being cast even if you aren't the one doing it. Excellent throughout all those moments. However, while the sounds are diverse and consistently interactive with the materials and locations you're in, many are still a bit off-putting in their sample style. Barret's gun sounds like a kid going while aiming finger guns, and the mantle and climbing sounds that often occur with Cloud have a very mushy, muted tone to them. This is especially noticeable, oddly, with rocks and stone sounds when shooting or busting them or walking through them, when a 10-ton boulder should sound like something massive. Instead, it sounds like a marble getting tossed into a sand pit. It's the oddest sound work, and it leaves a lot to be desired, especially because the game, number 1, is so grandiose, and number 2, has a lot of those effects, and it is something that plays again and again. And once you hear it the first time, you're going to hear it every time after that. Probably because the game is larger and more open world, more pronounced here. What is larger, more pronounced though, is the gameplay in Rebirth, because a lot has been added to a title that already had a great deal going for it, and it's a more open world title, a larger one, joining Cloud and others as they continue to try to take down Sephiroth. Speaking of the party, it's consistently divided with 3 main characters and 2 that have the backside. They're switchable at any time. One excellent bit of planning in this game is that you can make 3 teams, mixing and matching members, and switch them out outside of battle. So if you see a location and you know inside be monsters, you want to grab your frontline offensive heavy hitters, you can do that. Having those teams that you can switch out is something that I'll talk about again in a moment that really does help the game. Combat is a flow of real time and breaks from it whenever you want, while you can also hold a button to automatically do some moves. Of course, there's not enough buttons on a controller to take care of all of them, but it works quite well. Combat is a flow there. When you build enough gauge, you can perform special moves, both individually as well as with others in the party. You have your own personal skills built up on your different meters that can be pulled off, as well as switching out and teaming up with others in new synergy moves, and then summon moves as well. The best part about this is that it can make experimenting a bit more useful, switching up the team makeup more rewarding. Another thing I like about this is when you go in and buy any of the skills, you got those moves with your partners, as well as adding more one-off spells without using magic points. And while there are the occasional plus to health or plus to magic, it's actually split up enough that it doesn't feel like any of those are meted out in a lean way. You actually feel like when you get something in this game, it pays off dramatically and in a powerful way. When it comes to the equipment, you have weapons, armor, rings, pendants, and more, with you able to fit them with materia that goes up in level as you do battles. From being able to see enemies' information to fireballs, ice storms, lightning, healing, and setting characters who don't actively get controlled to use their special moves right away, the materia system is in and of itself a highly detailed minigame. Consistently seeing how leveling up a different weapon and what you're going to be able to do and put into it is always useful. It's always fun. And I actually did like to jump into this system and switch those out and see how it worked with different characters. When exploring, you ride chocobos across a landscape, you sniff out treasure, and you jet ski across lakes with them. It all works quite well, and it's matched up with a game world that's devoid of a ton of open world events or activities. They happen and they're there, but they're less scatterbrained and ADD-ridden than we see in other titles. Movement is also altered here. With a button press, it lets you not only roll around the landscape or in battle, but also you can mantle up and down obstacles in the game world. Getting to airborne enemies is a tiny bit easier in this game, depending on what skills you are using, but it still doesn't necessarily have the jump button in the way you would expect. However, this is very open to interpretation when it comes to activating it around the game world. While Cloud and Pals can climb a bit easier and move around with that action button, many times it's not lined up with the locations of the landscape, meaning you can think it should activate, but it won't, with you rolling around like a dumbass until you get right to the edge of something. While other times, it lets you activate it before Cloud even gets near it. While the game is very open with that interpretation, there are other times where it jumps many times higher than Cloud ever could, and then other times the dude doesn't appear to be able to bend at the knees. And that can make movement across uneven ground around the game world less fun than it should be. And this is something you see replicated most noticeably with the chocobos. If you're running around the game world and you get near water or go into it, the game has an almost weird reset animation. So instead of smoothly entering the water and just moving on, for some reason it has you almost stop and then start again. Like the movement system is 2 discrete levels or 2 discrete situations. And that's really something that you notice a couple times in Rebirth. Some additional problems. But one of those is not the side card game. So this is called Queen's Blood, the additional card game in Rebirth, and it's pretty damned enjoyable. It is you having cards on 3 horizontal rows. Each time you put down a card, that card adds point to any connecting spots around it, and its move pattern allows that. So, for example, one character or one card may add a point to the slots above and to the sides of it, effectively now making those slots level 2, meaning you can now put a level 2 card on those slots. This is a game that has some complexity, but they didn't make it so much so that no one would enjoy it unless you dived into it deeply. This is a moment in the game where there's actually a bit of judicious cutting, where it feels like they probably could have made it completely, insanely complex, but instead made it nice and smooth, nice and easy for people to get into. There's still some complexity there if you play against the characters who have better cards or who are better at it. And there's another part of this that I think is excellent and something that they did that I wasn't expecting. It's not necessarily as busy as you might expect originally. And this is a game world that, not being filled with enemies, also isn't necessarily filled with a ton of side missions or stuff to do. They're there, but it's just not one of those games that's absolutely filled with them. Personally, I actually find it exactly as balanced as I would want. I bounced from activity to activity, side mission to main mission to battle, in this way that just really felt nice, even though I could see some people playing this and wishing there were more bad guys everywhere. But they come out in the later, busier sections, and there's a VR battle system that you can gain different items by doing so. I was interested in all of this, and the game continued to grow on me more and more. That brings us to fun factor. First, I have to say, I think the game is actually awesome. Yes, it's sometimes frustrating, and there are things about it that I don't love, but it's well worth the asking price. It's just that Rebirth is a bit like watching an amazing fighter who's come back and has a bit of ring rust. It's a damn joy to play and watch, but just like that fighter in the example, I sometimes see it do something and go, ooh, damn. In gameplay, yes, it holds up. I loved some of the side moments, the activities, the specific characters that were hanging out alongside one another, doing different synergies. That's a nice add. But then, as I was running through some deadly countryland road just after slaughtering an entire shoe-filled factory worth of reptile things, I couldn't get Cloud to climb up a hill the size of a friggin' kindergartner's nappy time pillow. And then when I ran around to the other side of the rock, I was faced with more rocks that looked like they'd been textured by someone working with a memory limitation of a fucking speaking spell. It's a grandiose, insanely ambitious title that adds in places, yes, it may not need to, and in other spots could have done with a bit of shoring up, but it is more than the sum of its parts. And I actually find myself enjoying this more than I did the first title. That being said, it is fun as hell, and that's really what matters in a game like this. It continues the story, and it's a story that a lot of folks are probably going to love diving into. And I hope you like diving into reviews with me on these kind of things. Dragon's Dogma and a couple others are going to be coming up next. I hope you guys enjoy it. Jump into the game. Have a good time if you do so. And check out the podcast if you get a chance. Peace out.